Biden's marijuana pardons release no drug war prisoners. Hello guys, and welcome to another episode of Thinking Out Loud. Today we're going to be discussing Biden's recent announcement that he will be pardoning federally charged marijuana possessors. Now, for those of us who are on the cynical left, we already knew going into the nature of what entails his pardons, that it was a bunch of PR, political theater bullshit. But I'm going to be breaking down this article right here from Slate. It says why Biden's marijuana pardons are not enough, to kind of dissect exactly why this is bullshit for the many liberals that we're seeing that are lauding this as some like decisive move in the war on drugs. Now, guys, we're going to try to keep this one short because you know what? It's a short article. It's one or two things we're talking about, and I know I have a tendency to go on and on and on, but you know what? We don't need to talk about Biden's marijuana pardon for a fucking hour, do we? So we're going to try to keep this one short. We're going to dive into the reading right here from Slate. It says, why Biden's marijuana pardons are not enough. Hundreds of thousands of Americans are still waiting for something more. It says, no prisoners will walk free following President Joe Biden's pardon last week of low-level marijuana offenders. As president, Biden only has power to pardon federal offenders. And in recent years, the feds haven't been locking people up for possession. Meanwhile, the number of people federally convicted of trafficking and other more serious pot crimes fell from 7,000 in 2012 to just under 1,000 in 2021. It went from the feds' most convicted drug to their least. So first thing here right off the bat with this, it just says it in the first line. Really, we could end the video right here. He came out and, made this statement that he's going to be pardoning all these federal marijuana possessors. And then he encouraged governors and state legislators to do the same, right? Now, when you hear the president get up in front of that fucking podium with the emblem on it and go, we're going to pardon federally charged marijuana possessors, that sounds like a huge thing. You, in your mind, when you first hear it, you're like, wow, they're going to let people out of fucking jail for this. But that's not even what happened. Nobody's getting out of jail. Nobody, right? Essentially what this is going to do is expunge their record. But as we know, if you've ever, been convicted of a misdemeanor or anything like that, or been in any trouble in your life, you know that even with like, when they say that your record's going to be expunged, it's not fucking expunged, right? I guess on a good note with this, though, something I didn't know when I was reading this article is, it is a good sign that less and less of these federal charges for drug trafficking are coming from marijuana. At one point, it was the largest, and now it's the smallest. That's great. If you're going to have a war on drugs, the least you could do is focus it on fucking drugs that are actually destroying lives, right? Because as we all know, the war on drugs when it comes to marijuana, you got people using marijuana. It's not doing anything really negative to their life other than maybe they're eating some snacks they shouldn't be fucking eating and, spending a little bit too much money on weed. But the war on drugs with marijuana fucking destroys lives. The war on drugs in general destroys lives. But especially with marijuana because it's fucking weed, man. We don't even need to get into that. Let's do some more of the reading here. Biden's pardon instead benefits the roughly 6,500 Americans who have previously been convicted of federal possession. They have served their time or otherwise paid their debt. But having a conviction in their past can block their access to employment, housing, student loans, and other opportunities. Okay, so this is the size of what the pardon does. Okay, like it says in the first line, no one's getting out of jail. And as we'll read more in the article, as states are legalizing weed, you got people still serving life sentences for weed, right? But in theory, this pardon is going to expunge the records of 6,500 people. And it talks here like the president can't do anything else. And in the speech, he, made a comment encouraging governors and state legislators to, push this ball forward. We need to look at the way that the marijuana is scheduled. It shouldn't be Schedule 1, like with heroin and cocaine and things like that. But they try to paint it in this article, obviously, as though President Biden can't do anything else but again, he can't do anything else about the war on drugs surrounding marijuana than expunge the records of 6,500 people. That's it. In a country of about 400 million people, you're telling me the most that the president of the United States, the highest office in the fucking land, can do is expunge the record of 6,500 federally. That's it. He can't do anything else. I'm calling bullshit on that now. I'm not a fucking constitutional scholar. I'm not well read on legalese. But I guarantee you, the president of the United States, the guy with the most power in the fucking land on principle, on paper, can do more than expunge the record 6,500 people, right? Going on with this here, guys, says marijuana possession remains by far the country's most common drug charge, despite the fact that marijuana is legal in how many states now for recreational use and how many more in medical states. Arrests peaked at more than 800,000 in 2008, as with virtually everything related to drug prosecutions. People of color are far more likely to be punished, but the vast majority of these offenders went through state justice systems over which Biden has no control. Instead, he urged governors to follow his example. As they have legalized marijuana, some states have taken measures to expunge past pot offenses, others haven't. Nationwide, hundreds of thousands of people could probably be pardoned if governors heeded Biden's call. Now, that's crazy to me that the peak of really the war on drugs, at least when it comes to marijuana, was in 2008, because 2008 is when I was a freshman in high school, and when I first started to dabble in the devil's lettuce, right? And I just remember, being a marijuana user at that time, and like the paranoia and the fear and the stigma around it. Even that wasn't long ago, man. I mean, that was a little more than 10 years ago when I was sort of coming of age. I mean, it was just crazy. Like, you'd have to go wait in this parking lot for fucking 2 hours to get a 10 bag of weed, and then it would be full of seeds and it would suck dick. And half the time the bag was short, and the whole time you're in this car, like chain smoking fucking Newports, you'd be like, fuck, man, is that a cop? The whole damn time, right? And every week you were hearing about some kid you went to school with either getting caught with weed from his parents or getting busted by a cop. And when he got busted by the cop for the weed, you're like, damn, dude, his life's fucking over. His life's fucking ruined, And if your parents found a pot pipe or a little bag of weed, I mean, they looked at you like you were a fucking heroin addict, man. It's crazy. So, it's just crazy to me that the war on drugs surrounding marijuana was really reaching its peak there 2008, like right around the time that I was getting into it. And it really does kind of explain the fear and paranoia that 800,000 people were arrested. I don't know if that's the case, but 800,000 people leading up to 2008 or in 2008 were arrested for weed. So put that in perspective for some of you younger folks that like don't really understand what the war on drugs is like. I mean, I know when I was in Los Angeles and we went to a pot shop, I mean, the kids were younger than me. They're like 21, 22, maybe 23. And I was explaining how we're from a prohibition state. It's beyond the realm of understanding because the weed culture there is so casual and so normal and just it's a part of Californian culture at this point, right? The look on their face of shock and like they looked at us like we were from some backwoods village in like Eastern Europe or some shit, man. It was crazy. But I don't know. That's just interesting to me that at that time, 2008, just coming into, pre-adulthood, that's when the height of the drug war was. But yeah, like it says here, this isn't going to do anything. Maybe if the governors would follow suit, but we all know they're not going to. We certainly know Kim Reynolds isn't going to. Let's go on with the reading here, though, guys. It says, as in the federal system, state offenders for serious pot crimes are much more likely to be incarcerated. However, there are still people serving long-time sentences for mere possession. Several months after the state legalized medical marijuana, Mississippi's Supreme Court upheld a life sentence for Alan Russell, who'd been convicted of possessing about an ounce. the draconian sentence owed to his previous convictions for burglary and a weapons charge. In 1994, then Senator Joe Biden sponsored the crime bill that incentivized prison construction and accelerated mass incarceration, which you guys already knew. It's a remarkable moment for him as president to say no one should be locked up for holding weed. He also directed the federal government to review the plant's untenable legal status. It's federally illegal, but there are now more than 20 legal state markets. I mean, so yeah, that's just fucking crazy. Can you imagine being locked up in prison, being a person of color in particular, locked up in prison for life or for a decade, or even just, you know, having this on your record at the state level of having a marijuana possession charge, being kept out of housing, being kept out of jobs. Meanwhile, there's some rich ass fucking white dude that owns a fucking weed store that looks like a goddamn Apple store, making millions of dollars a year because you were smoking weed. And all around you, the culture's completely fucking changed. It's no longer frowned upon on the level that it is. And in 20 states, it's no longer fucking illegal to smoke it. I mean, it's crazy. And like the important point with this, though, when it comes to legalese in this segment is at the federal level for small-time level possession that Joe Biden is pardoning, that affects so few amount of people because what happens, like do you get charged, like it said in the article, do you get charged at the federal level for having a small amount of weed? Not usually. Usually you get charged at a local, municipal, or particularly a state level for small level possession. If you're getting charged at a federal level, it's because you were trafficking generally or selling large amounts. And as we see here, that isn't expunged. And the question is, why not? You know, why can't, even if you're trafficking thousands of pounds of weed and illegally making hundreds of thousands of dollars, at this point, when you have rich fucking white people, like I said, that own Apple store looking fucking weed stores, why can't you expunge the trafficking charges? You know, and I don't really have the historical background on this, but I wondered, like, when they repealed prohibition, like, did they expedite or clear the sentences and records of former, like, bootleggers or rum runners? I'm just curious. I couldn't tell you for sure. But it's like, at the end of the day, if it's no longer illegal in all these different states and you've got, like, why can't you just let go the traffickers too? Like, at the end of the day, unless they got involved in violence or, like, squabble over territory or money when it comes to the drug trade, if they didn't do anything violent, what did they do that was harmful to society? Evade taxes? I mean, it's illegitimate. It's completely ridiculous. Like, I don't know. It's just insane that it's still going on today. Let's do some more reading here, guys. It's probably not an accident that the announcement came weeks before the midterms. 2/3 of Americans and close to 80% of Democrats support legalization, and the pardon may give a boost to Democrats beyond the relatively few who make it central to their campaigns. The move, however, stops well short of helping to release prisoners who committed a crime that's no longer a crime, exactly like we were just saying. And here's the thing, yeah, like, this is one of the main things I wanted to point out with this video too. Democrats, the Democratic establishment as it exists, and of course your progressivism movement isn't going to do shit in the Democratic Party. We've had many videos about this. They are never going to do anything meaningful about marijuana reform or ending marijuana prohibition, because there's a huge capitalist class involved in the prison industrial complex and all the associated industries that go with the prison industrial complex that have a vested interest in making sure that people still get funneled into the system for weed. Because weed use is incredibly common, and therefore it is incredibly common that you're going to be able to charge somebody with it and put them in jail or fine them through the state or whatever and what have you. They're never, ever going to do anything about it. And as we've seen, talking about this article, Biden didn't really do anything about it either. He expunged the records of 6,500 people. He didn't take anybody out of the prisons because Joe Biden ain't going to fuck with the money of the prison industrial complex, plain and simple. And this is it, man. I mean, he's doing this because it looks fucking great to apolitical people during the midterms. I mean, something like this, and like he did with forgiving $10K of student loan, we broke down how that was a bunch of bullshit as well. This shit is great political theater, great political PR. It's a great fucking strategy to get some votes on the midterms. And I'm impressed by it, honestly, because I think it's enough to make it fucking work. You know, if you couple this with some of the rhetoric and the fact that we've got this pro-war hysteria and the huge propaganda machine coming through the mainstream media involved with that, I mean, despite the fact that the economy's in the complete shitter, you know, these political theater moves coupled with the fact that Joe Biden looks strong to certain levels of liberals when it comes to the war in Ukraine, defending freedom and democracy, it might be enough for them to fucking save the midterms. I can't guarantee it, but I got to pat them on the back for that. It's crazy. That's the only reason why they're doing this. And like we said, it didn't do shit in the first place. They're doing it to get votes. It's fucking cynical. Some more reading here for you guys. Says, as legalization becomes more widespread, the nature of pot crime has evolved with it. Though weed is legal here in California, the state licensed industry is in crisis because an estimated 70% of the product that consumers purchase comes from the illegal market. One reason illegal operators do so well is they don't tax upward of 35%, which state consumers must pay for legal product. Legalization has emboldened illegal operators to operate openly and at an industrial scale. Oklahoma, where there's a freewheeling medical marijuana market, has similar problems. Massive illegal farms are criminal enterprises. Their armed workers scare the neighbors. They pollute and steal water and power. They abuse defenseless workers. At some point, growing pot ceases to be a victimless crime. But amid pot's quasi-legality, states largely lack the will and means to crack down on them. Understandably, many cannabis lovers are reluctant to advocate serious punishments like imprisonment for any non-violent offender, like which they should. And, you know, when it comes to this illegal pot market, I understand, like, there's environmental degradation, there is the pollution, that stuff that they're talking about is very real. And, you know, one of the things you'll hear about is some of these cartels are coming up into, like, domestic, contiguous U.S. territory and setting up these pot farms, and you know, elements like that might be violent, but still, even if there probably should be some repercussions, not for the fact that you're growing the weed, but if you're like destroying the environment, destroying waterways with like nitrates and stuff from growing the weed, there should be repercussions for that. I don't know if it's jail time, I don't know if it's fine, I don't know, I mean, I don't know, but there needs to probably be a discussion about that. But as far as the growing of the weed itself, just fuck it, man. If someone's illegally growing weed on their own property, just fuck it. Let it alone. Like I said, if they're trafficking it to prohibition states, I mean, just fuck it. Leave it alone. No, there doesn't need to be these federal fucking charges with it, man. Like, if they get caught doing the trafficking in the state and the state charges them because it's a prohibition state, all right. I mean, that shouldn't be happening either, but fuck it. I mean, it is what it is. That's the risk they're paying, I guess, for the reward. But it's just insane. Just let it alone here. Industry leaders are probably right that reducing taxes for legal product is the fastest way to shut them down. And that is the case. We did see something like that in Canada. I think they kept it. I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. Drop a comment. I know some of you guys watching the show live in Canada, but I think they kept the tax rate so low that it's completely like destroyed the illegal market. But you know, I'm always torn on this issue, and I'm sure some of you guys are as well. I'm torn between making it generally legal and then just decriminalizing, because if we make it generally legal, you do have the potential for tax revenue for the state, and that could be great. Tax revenue for the federal government too. But given the nature of the fact that we live in a capitalist, imperialist society, it's like, what are those tax dollars going to be used for? I don't know. If if you write laws that's like this has to go for drug rehabilitation and you know, like mental health stuff involving like actual hard drug use that's destroying lives. If you legislate that all that tax dollars has to go to that, something I could maybe get behind. But a lot of times you'll see it goes to law enforcement. We don't need any more of that. I mean, so, you know, tax dollars in this society is just a big black hole. So a lot of times you'll hear people that are proponents of legality like come at you with all the tax money, all the tax. It's like, bitch, I don't give a fuck. We pay enough in taxes that we shouldn't have to worry about schools or higher education or hospitals or food, or we should not have to worry about anything when it comes to what we need to survive and develop as human beings. We pay enough tax dollars that the government should be taking care of all that. But as we know, we got to send money to Ukraine. We got wars to fight. We got imperialism and colonialism to prop up. Right. So, and then the other aspect when it comes to like outright legality is then, I mean, we all know how it's going to go. It's going to come to big capitalists coming in and shutting down all these little mom and pop weed stores. And, you know, you've got all the little weed mans, your local friendly neighborhood weed man, that this is putting his kid through college, god damn it. And what happens to all those people? And that's hundreds of thousands of people that have made their living or been able to live some modicum of economic dignity from selling weed or weed related products, you know. And so when you make it legal and you allow big capital to come in and invest in it and chain franchise it and shit, turn these weed apple stores, like we said, you're pushing all those guys out, man. And you're pushing out for oftentimes people of color, man, who that's like their only real livelihood is to be able to, you know, flip a little weed and have some extra money, right? But then, so, you know, with those arguments, you're kind of leaning more towards decriminalization, where there's just, you're not going to get thrown in prison for using weed or growing weed or distributing small amounts of weed. We're just going to leave it the fuck alone. It's kind of what I lean towards. Excuse me. But again, with that, you do have these illegal pot farms that get industrial on scale. You still could potentially have the criminal or violent element, you know, think prohibition, you know, the mobsters with that. And then you have the environmental degradation that comes from it when people try to ramp it up to this industrial scale on public land, destroying waterways, clear-cutting woods, things like that. So I don't know. Maybe you guys can drop a comment. Let me know what you lean towards. I tend to lead towards the more decriminalization camp. And then if we are going to have law enforcement resources dedicated to circumventing some of the excesses of that, it should be more like DNR type stuff where your weed thing gets shut down and you're fined or whatever for the environmental degradation or destruction rather than for growing the weed or tax evasion or any of that shit. That's kind of what I'm leaning towards, but you guys should drop a comment and let me know what you think about it. Going on with that, we have some of that with the reading here too. It says, today American cannabis culture functions as both a religion and a for-profit industry. It's a culture that reveres outlaws. Its high priests are the legacy growers of Humboldt County who dodged helicopters and risked their freedom to grow the sacred medicine. Today, those stories get recast as small, quote-unquote, legal growers fighting for survival against bland corporate weed. The illegal market has more staying power than bathtub gin after Prohibition, and that's a huge problem for legal growers, large and small. So it's like, I mean, I don't know how you guys feel, but again, that goes with what we were saying before, decriminalization versus legalization. And, you know, in my heart, I can't help but lean towards that criminal underbelly. You know, Eugene Debs, as long as there's a criminal element, I am of it. And I just can't help lead towards that. Maybe that is the fetishism of being an outlaw, right? But I don't know. Drop a comment. Let me know what you guys think about it. Some of these questions went on trial in federal court in May. Jonathan Wall, a white 27-year-old, smuggled hundreds of pounds of weed from California to the East Coast. The amount of product was tiny compared to what state licensed farms produce, but he had operated outside any legal channel. Wall's co-conspirators, with whom not long ago he'd been followed by Fish, pleaded guilty. Wall pleaded not guilty, taking a stand for question. His lawyer posed in a filing, who will be the last American to be deprived of their life and liberty from marijuana? So he's selling less and trafficking less than what wholesale industrial marketeers are doing, but like he's going to be put in prison potentially for 10 years. Why? Is it because of the tax evasion? Well, it's like in cases like that, like if you get caught, I mean, just make him pay the back taxes. I mean, what did he do? Did he hurt anybody? I don't think so. Going on with this here, guys, says the storing rhetoric proved grievously ill-advised as a legal strategy. Wall's buddies testified, and the jury convicted him of running an interstate trafficking operation. You know, fuck the snitches. Now your buddy got a RICO charge, you assholes. He now awaits sentencing, facing a mandatory incarceration 10 years, like we said. You know, but then the guy that is from a good family and has access to capital that can grow on an industrial scale greenhouse, you know, he's an entrepreneur. But Wall here, he's a fucking criminal and an outlaw and a smuggler. It's just insane. And this, again, coming back to it, Biden's pardons here do nothing for him. They do nothing at all. For advocates and people who were swept up in the federal government's marijuana prosecution for decades, Biden's move to pardon federal possession offenders is a welcome recognition, but it only helps a small fraction of the people whose lives such enforcement has ruined. Mine being one of them. Not because I've ever been involved with like the drugs and selling of drugs, but you know, my dad was, many members of my family were, and we were, because of their arrests for being drug users or small level drug distributors, our whole family was relegated to this second caste of the felon caste system, and it kept us in poverty. And I had no access to college, no access to, you know, anything that would have maybe kept me on the straight and narrow and helped me develop as a kid, like, you know, extra classes, to just everything that comes with being relegated to poverty because your parents are in and out of fucking jail, or because they've been in jail can't get a decent job. You know, it set me behind as an individual despite being a law-abiding citizen for fucking it set me 10 years back. A good example is that I was not able to save enough money or get the time or wherewithal to get a car or get a license until I was 25. And so how many jobs did I have to miss out, or opportunities did I have to miss out on? That's just one example. You know, the war on drugs destroyed my fucking family too on an emotional and familial and spiritual level. You know, this is the cost of that, and that's just me, man. I'm a child of the war on drugs. My entire life story is about drugs and the war on drugs, drug use, drug addiction, poverty, crime, jail time. That's my story. One, you know, and this does nothing for that. Doesn't expunge my dad's record. It's too late now anyway. He's about 60 years old. It does nothing for anybody, really, man. Ending this off here, guys, says there's obvious hypocrisy in the overlapping systems that lock up small-time hustlers while companies across state line or even within it harvest weed on an industrial scale. But there are far fewer people locked up than there used to be. At the same time, some of the states that have legalized are far ahead of Biden in expunging the records of low-level offenders. This is progress, but it's progress that has taken far too long, especially if it only ends here. So, yeah, I mean, not to be completely cynical, I mean, obviously Biden's doing of this is a cynical move to garner votes for the midterm. He's never going to take on his cronies that are paying his bills for campaign and re-election and book deals and shit that work in the prison industrial complex. But we are seeing progress, and, you know, drugs is winning the war on drugs. It's going to come out in the end, I think, on the side of drugs. So, you know, place your bets now before it's all over. But before it's all over, you know, thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of more lives are going to be destroyed. And people's freedom are going to be taken away, and it's just going to be terrible, as it already has been. But the last note I want to end you on with this, you know, we try to bring it back to capitalism on this channel. And I want to have a discussion, a quick little discussion about the sort of dichotomy or the conflicts of interest that's going on around this war on drugs right now. Okay. Try to give you a little perspective. So on the war on drugs at its stage right now, where we're starting to see legalization, we're seeing the culture change around it. We have 20 states where it's legal. You know, the weed culture is a staple of American mass culture now, right? But we still have it illegal on a federal level. We still have people being locked up. We still have people being fined. It's Scheduled 1, you know. So in this stage of the war on drugs, we have two different vying elements of the capitalist class, two little fiefdoms, if you will. On the one side, on the side of legalization, you have large scale and small scale petty bourgeois capitalists that want to get into a legal market because it is a huge and growing market. There are tens of millions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to be made selling marijuana, selling cannabis. So on that side of the battle, the side of legalization, you have these capitalists that want to profit off of something that was previously involved in the war on drugs, right? Obviously. On the other side, you have the prison industrial complex and everything that goes with it. Police unions, private prison contractors, all the companies that supply and manage the private prisons, like telecommunications. There's a company that comes in and charges people for phone calls, the meals, the laundry. All this stuff is done by private corporations. And then you have all kinds of other police lobbying groups along with the police union. So you have two different sides of this war on drugs now. Okay, you got the capitalists that want to make money selling the weed, and then you got the capitalists on this side that want to make money by locking motherfuckers up into the prison industrial complex. Why am I telling you this? I mean, that seems pretty obvious when I lay it out like that, right? I want to tell you this because it just shows that as people, we really don't have a fucking say about what gets done in a capitalist, liberal, bourgeois democracy. In liberal democracy, what we want does not fucking matter. Okay? Now, when you look at this just loosely, apolitically, you see the process of legalization going on in states, and you're like, wow, this has happened because of mass movement. And you're partially right. Okay? So the mass movement of people against the war on drugs, for cannabis, ending cannabis prohibition, did play a major role in getting the ball rolling, changing the culture, making it normal, right? But that's not why it's getting made legal in the States. At the end of the day, it's not getting made legal because of that. It's getting made legal because people with money, capitalists, are pushing to make it legal. Because if mass movements did anything democratically to change shit, like lastingly, we'd be living in a fundamentally different society. And the only reason we're seeing some change on cannabis is because there's money to be made. Okay? All right. So just to bring this back again, the only reason we're seeing anything done with this is because there's one group of capitalists vying against another. Okay? Because that is the only thing that causes any change or system construction or deconstruction in this country. It ain't what you fucking want. Okay? It's what the cannabis growers want. Cannabis grower capitalists want versus the prison industrial capitalists. Okay, and they're duking it out right now with this war on drugs. And who knows who's going to come out. I'm leaning towards the idea that in the end, while you may see some state, you're never going to see full legalization on a federal level of marijuana. You might, but that we got to realize the power of the cannabis growing capitalists is incredibly minute or weak compared to the power of the prison industrial complex. Like, think about everything that goes in the prison industrial complex, what I just said. the police unions, the private prisons, the contractors, because that is also a part of the border crisis and the refugee crisis and locking people up in internment camps down there. Okay, that is a massively huge industry. Okay, that is incredibly bloodthirsty and cruel. Because over here, some of these capitalists are a little hippy dippy. I'm gonna grow weed, make some money, and live on my ranch. Woohoo! Right? Now, there is big and ugly capitalists, bloodthirsty capitalists in that group too, but nowhere near the level of people whose entire industry it is to enslave human beings and use them for cheap corporate labor, right? Anyway, guys, I'm rambling a little bit with that, but I just wanted to lay that out. This is the only reason why there's any discussion about this at all. It's not because you give a fuck about it. It's because there's money to be made, and there's two vying sectors of capitalists, fiefdoms of capitalists, kind of duking it out as to how this situation, the war on drugs involving cannabis, is going to be resolved. But yeah, guys, that's all I have for you. Hopefully it turned out to be a short video, but I'm looking at that runtime, and it is what it is, you know. Drop a comment. Let me know what you think about this. Let me know if you think I'm on the money with my analysis, with the cynicism of the Democratic Party and Joe Biden trying to garner votes while really doing nothing on the war on drugs. In particular, let me know what you think about my analysis regarding about these two vying sectors of the capitalist class. If you feel up to it, maybe drop your story of how the war on drugs has affected your family. And like I said earlier, drop a comment too. Let me know what you think. Decriminalization versus legalization, pros and cons. Let's get a discussion going down in the comments. But yeah, guys, as I said, that's all I have for you. As always, it's great hanging out with you, and I'll speak with you again soon. Bye.